What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about a small interactive incident that happened to me a couple of years ago, which is we had a Singaporean delegation visit us in Dubai, and they were talking about what Singapore was doing in terms of its economic development. And they were coming to compare themselves with what Dubai was doing, and just a general conversation with different friends. And they said that Singapore was encouraging negative economic growth. And that was quite interesting as a subject, because as a city, you're always looking at perpetual growth. But this negative growth was the reason for them to encourage social development and social growth. So growth economically does not necessarily mean that the city is doing better, but social development equally is far more important in terms of quality of life. And so this conversation today, sustainability and social fabric, discusses three topics, which is the future, and then sustainability and society. And all forms of sustainability can be argued to be social. And since society is governed by behavior, I think, therefore, practices of sustainability are related to behavior. So what I'd like to do is maybe just ask you a simple question is, what is your general understanding of sustainability, of social sustainability? Why is it important for you and your practice? And maybe give a brief background about your practice. So anyone?
Want to go first?
Sure. The word sustainability to me is such an important one right now, but also such a heavy one. And so I would rather talk about the future and about abundance and about possibility and how to design into that. It's such an intriguing thing to hear about Singapore. I think essentially thinking about quality over quantity, perhaps. But in nature, which is what we're all part of and where we all come from, there is this just sense of unruly abundance and trying out things. And that's also what's happening in the cultures of the world. And I have so much respect for that, because when we talk about sustainability, so often we talk about constraint and reduction and reducing and recycling, and it gets heavy. And there isn't room for a lot of innovative, creative possibility in that conversation. So whenever we can switch it back to imagining how it can lead to abundance is when I get excited and interested in it. Now, if we are talking about scarcity, and things running out and losing things, we're losing so much in the world in terms of human skill and of craftsmanship, which is, I know, something that you wanted to talk about. And craftsmanship is where we have the opportunity to bring hands back into reality, to bring us back into reality. Humans, as an extension of nature, have created so much that ends up feeling so distant from nature and from ourselves. And so I think the core of what I'm doing with my team at Ibuku, we're building with bamboo, and we're building it in a way that I hope just best expresses its wild, beautiful, natural form, while adding human value. And we're doing that because it's possible with craftsmen. We have really skilled craftsmen who were doing something very dissimilar before. They were working with bamboo, but in very different ways. And the innovative process of working with them to guide and to discover, really, a new way of working with bamboo is, I think, there's a model there, there's a lesson there that I'm excited to take into other materials.
So Prem, I'll let you.
When I think about sustainability, I think historically we have at times blamed cities from a sustainability perspective. But if you look at it, city dwellers have a much lower carbon footprint than suburban or exurban dwellers, just from the transportation needs and the general needs of a suburban or exurban dweller. And therefore, when you think about 3 billion people moving into cities, and you think about the fact that what was once thought that the internet would cause a dispersion of people, but has actually caused people to move towards cities, we have a real opportunity if we think about urban spaces and how to make them sustainable in the sense that they're able to live off the resources that they have. What you can get to is a point where we're not extracting resources at a rate so high that they're unable to replenish themselves. And so that, to me, is the definition of sustainability. Now, from a social sustainability perspective, one of the downsides, I think, of the current urban environments is that they've created social isolation. And so the question is, how can you live in such a crowded space and yet close your doors and look through your window but not actually interact with the human beings around you? And how we essentially create a public realm again that for the last 100 years has been created for automobiles, but turn it back to be a public realm for individuals and people, I think is a way that you can create that social sustainability inside urban spaces.
So maybe I can ask you to talk about what is Sidewalk Labs, because I think sometimes we've jumped into something. So what is Sidewalk Labs? How is it part of Google? And why did Google create Sidewalk Labs, and where are you delivering what it is that you're delivering?
So Sidewalk Labs is an entity separate from Google's. Google's a sister company of ours. We both report into Alphabet as the holding company. But Sidewalk Labs was created largely because of the fourth industrial revolution, that there is this opportunity right now to take kind of forward-thinking urban design and infuse it with technology in a way that can radically improve the quality of urban life. And so when we think about radically improving the quality of urban life, we're thinking about spaces such as mobility, such as the environmental sustainability, affordability, diversity of urban spaces. And Sidewalk Labs currently has, through a rigorous process, gotten the opportunity to write up a master development plan for a tract of land on the waterfront of Toronto to build out this district and prove where cities can move forward.
And so it's focused on getting the car out of the element and focused on, so I think also from a social sustainability perspective, what type of process do you take?
So internally, we are organized with what we call our pillar leads, who are essentially subject matter experts and urban planners in areas such as mobility, sustainability, so on and so forth. And they pair along with, I myself am a technologist, purely an urban dweller, but a technologist. And we pair those folks with our product managers, technologists, as well with folks on the policy side to think about how to move forward. So as a specific example of that, when we think about mobility, and you think about the fact that we as a society essentially ceded urban space to automobiles, there is an opportunity for us to think about what it means in an era of good public transit and autonomous vehicles to no longer worry about our safety on the roads and once again turn that space into ours again.
A very good friend of mine came back from Bali one day, and he said that he visited the most beautiful school that had all the amenities and technologies that exist in any school, yet was so rooted in local craft. And I think Saskia's talk said that the technologies are available, but people choose cities. So why do you choose Bali? And how have you been able to bring the world and the technologies to it?
I choose Bali because my heart's there. I grew up there. I love it. But I see so many people choosing Bali for a sense of possibility that can happen when you have a place that's very, real in its natural form, although many places in the world are. But that has always been so cultivated and connected with humans. Humans have been carving the rice terraces of Bali for 2,000 years. And we call that nature, but I think it's the perfect expression of nature in the sense that it's humans working with the landscape and navigating it in a way that can be harmonious. So something about the magic, maybe that starts there, has become a magnet for people from around the world in a very small way compared to a big city like Dubai, but in an important way. It's become a magnet for innovators and designers. And in the best cases, that's paired with possibilities that emerge from the culture of Bali and the skill in people's hands, the bountiful resources. And so in the mix of that, my father and my stepmother founded a school called the Green School. And that has become an extreme magnet. Many of the families at the Green School move there in order to put their kids in the school because they want to be a part of that community.
I would encourage people to Google Green School and just look at some of the pictures while we're speaking.
And I think what people feel and find at Green School, even if they didn't think they were necessarily concerned about sustainability or anything, is there's a sense of realness there, and there's also a sense of magical possibility. At the Green School, they took a material which wasn't used very much before this in permanent structures and created an entire campus of buildings out of it, and not just buildings, but beautiful forms that really speak and draw people in. And there's a beauty piece of it that makes possibility open up. And since then, more technological parts and more practical parts of education and curriculum have come to fall into place there, but it started as just a series of beautiful shells. And it's been amazing to watch that.
I'll open the conversation to questions, so just feel free just to put your hand up at any point, and a mic will come your way for a question. But while you're thinking about whether to ask a question or not, I think both Ibuku and Sidewalk Labs, in some form of way, deal with strengthening social bonds within the environments they exist in, but at a total different scale and at a total different mechanics. But you were talking about in the introduction of timber as a form of carbon sequestration. And I was thinking of what learnings, I'm interested in looking at materiality and scale as well.
Yeah, so when we were considering how to go about achieving, our goal at the end of the day is a climate positive district. And if we can show that a climate positive district is also financially viable, then it would make sense for the world to go in that direction. And what we know about steel production is that it's actually quite costly from a carbon perspective. Where it's produced, how it's transported. There's a lot of waste that's created along the way. And one of the technologies, if you can use that word, that we're very excited for is, tall timber sky rises, which we think give an opportunity, again, forests locally in Canada that source these, use local carpentry, unions to build these structures and then put them together on site that give you this opportunity to do that. That's at a large scale, and looking at some of Elora's work that she's done with bamboo on the local scale, it gives you a lot of ideas of how you can use the local environment around you to build up, whether it's in an urban or in a non-urban space.
Do you want to answer that, or just leave it?
What it made me think of was there's a space where the material that you choose guides the way. To choose timber makes a lot of sense in a bigger picture perspective. We chose bamboo in part because it's so efficiently practical. It grows in 3 years, and it can grow wild without much human cultivation, although you can enhance it that way. So we chose it for those reasons, but also we chose it and stuck to it through the innovation process, which is a challenge, because it's beautiful and it has so much to offer, and we connect with it and resonate with it. And that's because we are, I think, craving in culture this sense of realness and nature. And I see that playing out here a little bit. There's in any world where things have happened so quickly, there is, and so much formed by humans, there's a tendency toward things that are less real and less away from nature. And then there's a pull back to it. I think there's a place where we're really craving a timber beam or a bamboo, column. There's something in there that we need to respect.
It's so funny because if you think about like visions of the future, the Jetsons and so on and so forth, they're always steel and they're always curvy. And yet a lot of what we want is kind of that biophilic design back to nature, right? And that's happening a lot more.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, I always feel much at ease within a wooden structure. It's far more comfortable to be in a wooden
or an
structure.
earth structure.
Or an earth structure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very true. I think.
Good morning. I'm Nicholas. I'm the president of the Future Society. My question regards the problem of scale. One of the key challenges in engineering the shift of paradigm is to devise the right ways for these new technologies and approaches to scale, which is difficult to deliver at the level of a city, for which we require an articulation from the very national, if not global, down to the very metropolitan in terms of finance and across urban systems. So what thoughts do you have in terms of how you are solving this scale problem vis-a-vis bamboos or vis-a-vis different construction materials? What are you doing towards that, and what do you think are the main challenges vis-a-vis that?
In the simplest terms, the issue of scale is ridiculously appropriate for bamboo, because imagine buildings that none of the material that they were built with existed on Earth 4 years before you built them. If you're planning a city and you plant a plantation, never mind that the tropical parts of the world are covered with bamboo plantations. So from there, from a natural resources point of view, it is obvious. On top of that, you need a lot of human innovation, which is also obvious. We know that humans can innovate wildly and quickly and efficiently and dynamically.
When we at Sidewalk, we were founded in 2015 and spent a few years thinking about how to go about solving some of the pressing urban challenges of the day. And what we found was these are very complex problems that are all multidisciplinary as well as related to one another. You pull one lever and 3 other items move. And therefore, the opportunity to build a district from the ground up gave us this chance to essentially prove out this thesis that we had around cities. Now, when I think about scale also, I think coming as a pure technologist in the digital realm, when we think about time frames of scale and we think about size of scale, it's extremely different from an internet perspective versus from an urban perspective. So, my scale was, billions of users over the course of 3 months or so. While in the city sense, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of residents over the course of 20 years. In addition to that, you have to think about, how, on the internet you can make a mistake and you can fix that bug quite quickly. It doesn't work that way in the lived environment. So how you go about thinking about this in an extremely careful and thoughtful way when people are actually going to live in this space and have to function in this space is extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about the point of actually growing it and making sure that the resources are available in 4 years, that's quite interesting in terms of relationship between the biobuildability of the resources.
I mean, I see a future where precious minerals that take millennia to form are absolutely used in the context where they can be altered and reused in a cycle which keeps their value and keeps them useful to us for another millennia. If you're using resources that take a certain amount of time to form, you have a responsibility to design the rest of their use as at least the same as what it took to create them.
So there's a design ethics conversation.
Yes,
so
a longer-term thinking perspective as a challenge for human design innovation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry. Hi, I'm Alejandro. I'm from the University of Oxford. And I would like to ask you about the implementation and communication of these ideas to governments, but particularly to governments that are not New York or San Francisco, but governments in third world countries, of cities of 1 million, but not necessarily connected to the global economy, that are quite backwards, that have not implemented technological innovations, that are reticent to change. And because all of these ideas sound excellent, to be honest, but of course they involve a lot of change, and change normally involves fears. So how do you communicate these ideas to governments, and especially to politicians that are normally interested in short-term gains? So this seems to me quite challenging, and I would like to know how have you communicated or implemented these ideas?
Well, we're working on the scale of individuals, and I don't know how to speak to governments or politicians, but I do know how to speak to humans, and we're all humans, and I think the key to that is to find the place of access that has to do with inspiration. It's usually to do with beauty, it's usually to do with abundance or enthusiasm. So there has to be an in there somewhere from that side of the conversation.
Just to add to that, I don't know if you've heard of the work of Alejandro Aravena from Chile. He's done a lot of great design integration within governments, and also the bus rapid transport system in Bogota in Latin America. Those are two excellent examples of how innovation has been able to influence the transportation industry as well as the public housing sector. But if you want to attend.
Sure. I think largely what Elora said is true. At the end of the day, it comes down to the quality of life and the residents, most importantly, the people who are going to live in this place. And if you're able to connect to them on a personal level, Sidewalk Labs has done a lot of work in community outreach with public roundtables and made sure that we have not only heard the feedback, but also evolved with the feedback that we've heard over time. In the case of Toronto specifically, Ontario, Canada, this is a country and a locality that very much does worry about climate change and does care about the broader environment and has goals around affordability and diversity that we think fit nicely with our mission and vision. That allows us at least to prove a testing ground. But fundamentally, I think going back to the question on scale, to be able to go to the rest of the world and prove that this is going to be beyond, one plot in one city is showing that it's financially viable. Because at the end of the day, if you can show that creating a climate positive district is actually financially viable, then why wouldn't any city want to use their tax revenue towards it? It would be almost stupid not to. And so if you can prove that point out, I think you can completely change the conversation and shift that thought process, hopefully, in cities globally.
One more question.
Hello, my name is Marcus from the MIT Media Lab, and I'm very interested in the idea of transfer of ideas, how some of these concepts that are learned in Toronto or in Bali get absorbed and understood so that they could be either directly appropriated or, the kind of ideas be put into some format that's usable in New York City or in any other context. That's a...
So if I can rephrase the question, it's how have their practices or their methodologies or their thought processes have been transferred either to people from within the community or people beyond their communities? Beyond their communities. Permeated throughout, disseminated. Okay.
Thank you so much for bringing it there, because we get approached a lot with, please teach us how these carpentry techniques. And we're happy to do that, and we actually have started doing that. We started a course called Bamboo U, because of so many people reaching out wanting to connect, and people think, perhaps often at first, that they want to learn how to work with bamboo the way we do, which is totally beside the point. They want to tap into the way that we're thinking that will lead them to think something locally relevant for design. It's a design idea. It's in there. So I'm really looking for how we can, I feel like we've tapped into something really special, and it's going to be much more relevant than to other people in the world and other places than how to make anything that looks like the product that we're making at the moment. In the bigger picture, it's going to be what are the thoughts that guided us there that can be translated into other materials and into other ways of thinking. And yeah. So I'm looking for how we can capture that and translate that. How can you find a material? Bamboo is an obvious one, but a material that won't run out, that you can rely on, that you can regenerate quickly. And then how can you put ideas into it and form it in ways that will look wildly different in different parts of the world?
For us at Sidewalk, one of our goals over the last year and over the coming few months is to publish what we're calling the Master Innovation and Development Plan for this region that we hope to be able to build on. And that plan will be published publicly. Now, mind you, the specifics of using tall timber in Toronto may not be the right technology solution for a specific area, but what it offers is a sort of outline or a blueprint from which each locality will take its own culture, its own local supply chain, and hopefully be able to apply it in a localized way. Secondly, a lot of the technologies that we're building out, we have taken the stance that we're not trying to build the iPhone for a city, but rather trying to build the internet for a city, or in other words, an open, innovative layer of technology that anyone can plug into that, prevents kind of the technology lock-in that exists today in a lot of existing cities. And if you take that kind of concept from a technology perspective and you apply it across the chain all the way to the physical environment, we think this gives a lot of modularity and opportunity for existing cities to kind of pick up the pieces of the puzzle they think are most relevant for themselves.
So, because we're 7 minutes over and lunchtime due, I'll end the session at that note. Thank you very much for spending time with us today, and thank you to our speakers as well. And have a great afternoon. Thank you.